It was around 9:30 p.m. when I decided to make a quick trip to Walmart. I needed some essentials, and it was one of those nights where I just felt restless and thought running an errand might help. Big mistake. The parking lot was pretty empty when I got there. A few cars scattered around, but not much else. The store closes at 10, so I figured I'd have enough time to get in and out. I parked near the entrance and walked in. You know that feeling when something just feels off? I had that almost immediately, but I brushed it off as me being paranoid. I mean, it's just Walmart, right? Inside, it was the typical late-night scene. Quiet, a few employees restocking shelves, and hardly any customers. I went straight to the toiletries section to grab some toothpaste and shampoo. As I was walking down the aisle, I noticed a guy standing at the end, just sort of lingering. He wasn't doing anything, just staring at the shelves. I didn't think much of it at the time. After I got what I needed, I headed towards the grocery section to pick up some snacks. That's when I noticed the same guy again. He was a few aisles over, just standing there. It was weird, but again, I thought maybe he was just another customer taking his time. I grabbed my snacks and started towards the self-checkout. As I was scanning my items, I heard movement behind me. I glanced over my shoulder, and there he was, just standing a few feet away, staring at me. My heart started racing. I finished up as quickly as I could and headed for the exit. Walking to my car, I kept looking over my shoulder. The parking lot was even emptier now, and every shadow seemed to move. I unlocked my car and got in, locking the doors immediately. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking I was safe. But then, in my rearview mirror, I saw him again. He was standing at the entrance of the store, just watching me. I started my car and pulled out of the parking lot, trying to stay calm. I told myself it was just a coincidence, that he was probably just some weird guy. But then, as I turned onto the main road, I saw headlights behind me. At first, I thought it was just another car leaving the store, but as I made turns and changed lanes, the car stayed right behind me. Panic set in. I didn't want to go straight home, so I decided to take a longer route, hoping to lose him. I made a series of random turns, but no matter what I did, the car was still there. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do. I didn't want to stop and confront this person, and I definitely didn't want to lead them to my house. After about 20 minutes of driving aimlessly, I remembered there was a police station not too far from where I was. I headed in that direction, hoping that the sight of a police station would scare him off. As I got closer, I noticed the car behind me started to slow down. I made a quick turn into the police station parking lot and watched as the car sped off into the night. I sat there for a while, trying to calm down. After I felt like it was safe, I drove home, still shaking. I parked in my garage and went inside, locking every door and window. That night I barely slept, jumping at every little noise. The next day, I told a friend about what happened, and they suggested I report it to the police. I did, but without a license plate number or a clear description of the guy, there wasn't much they could do. They said they'd keep an eye out for suspicious activity around the area. I've worked the night shift at Walmart for a couple of years now, and I've seen some weird things. But this one night a few months back still sticks with me. It was a typical quiet night. Most of the overnight crew were in the back unloading a shipment, so I was left alone to stock the shelves in the home goods section. I actually enjoy the solitude usually. But that night felt different. Around 2:30 a.m., I noticed a shopping cart in the middle of the aisle that I hadn't seen before. It was filled with random items, canned food, a pair of shoes, a blanket. It looked like someone had been shopping and then just abandoned the cart. I pushed it to the side and kept working, thinking nothing of it. A little while later, as I was arranging some towels, I heard a faint rustling noise. I glanced around but didn't see anything. I figured it was just the air conditioning kicking in or something minor like that. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I turned my head quickly but saw nothing. The aisle was empty. I shook it off and went back to stocking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It's hard to explain, but the air felt heavy, like there was someone standing right behind me. After a few more minutes, I heard a soft thud, like something falling to the floor. I walked to the next aisle and found a pillow lying on the ground. It was one of those big decorative ones, not something that would just fall off the shelf easily. I put it back and continued working, but the sense of unease grew stronger. As the night went on, small things kept happening. I'd hear footsteps when no one was there. Items I had just shelved would be on the floor again when I returned. At one point, I went back to the shopping cart I had moved earlier and found it filled with completely different items. It was unsettling, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe one of the other employees was messing with me. Around 4 a.m., I decided to take a break and grab a coffee from the break room. As I was walking there, I passed the toy section and noticed something odd. All the toys with batteries, the ones that make noise or light up, were turned on. They were flashing and playing their little tunes, even though they had all been off earlier. I stood there for a moment, just staring, feeling a chill run down my spine. I quickly walked to the break room, trying to shake off the weird vibe. But when I got there, the door was slightly open, and the lights were flickering. I stepped inside, and the flickering stopped. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't relax. I sat down with my coffee, and that's when I noticed it. There was a small handprint on the table. It looked like it had been made with dust or dirt. But it was clearly a child's handprint. It made no sense. Kids aren't in the store at that hour, and the break room is off limits to customers. I wiped it away, feeling increasingly uneasy. I finished my break and decided to check in with one of my coworkers in the back. When I found him, he mentioned that he had heard some strange noises too, like someone whispering or breathing close by. We both laughed it off, trying to make light of it, but I could tell he was just as freaked out as I was. We decided to walk the store together just to make sure everything was in order. As we walked through the aisles, the sense of being watched never left me. We checked the security cameras, but saw nothing unusual. No signs of anyone else in the store, no shadows or strange movements. Just the two of us, looking increasingly paranoid. By the time my shift ended at 7 a.m., I was exhausted both physically and mentally. I told my manager about the strange occurrences, but he just shrugged it off, saying it was probably just our imaginations running wild during the long night. I still work the night shift, but I haven't experienced anything like that night again. I don't know what was going on, and I try not to think about it too much. But every now and then, when I'm alone in a quiet aisle, I still feel like I'm not really alone. I've been working the overnight shift at Walmart for about a year now. It's usually pretty uneventful, just me and a few coworkers restocking shelves and handling inventory. But there was one night that still gives me chills whenever I think about it. It was a typical Tuesday night. Around 1 a.m., I was assigned to the garden section to clean up and organize. The garden section is at the far end of the store, and it's always kind of eerie at night. It's dimly lit with tall shelves full of garden supplies casting long shadows. I was sweeping up some dirt when I noticed an old, rusty watering can that looked out of place. It was covered in cobwebs and dust like it hadn't been touched in years. I picked it up to move it to the back, but as I did, I heard a soft, scraping sound coming from one of the aisles. Thinking it might be a stray animal or something, I walked over to check it out. I didn't see anything at first, But then I noticed that one of the bags of soil had a tear in it and soil was scattered on the floor. I cleaned it up, assuming it was just a coincidence, and went back to my sweeping. A few minutes later, I heard the scraping sound again, but louder this time. It sounded like metal against concrete. I followed the noise to the outdoor patio furniture area. As I approached, I saw one of the metal chairs slowly sliding across the floor on its own. It moved a few inches, then stopped. I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There was no one else around, and no reason for the chair to move like that. I cautiously walked over to it and inspected the floor, thinking maybe it was uneven or something. But there was nothing unusual. I pushed the chair back into place and decided to take a short break. As I headed toward the employee break room, I passed by the aisle with the seasonal items. There in the middle of the aisle was a scarecrow decoration that hadn't been there before. It was propped up against the shelf, its blank eyes staring straight ahead. I knew for a fact that the scarecrow had been on a top shelf, still in its box, earlier that night. There was no way it could have ended up in the aisle on its own. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I tried to brush it off as someone playing a prank. I continued to the break room and found it empty. I made myself a cup of coffee, trying to shake off the weird vibes. As I sat there, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. The small TV in the corner was off, but I could see my reflection in the screen. And behind me, just for a second, I thought I saw a shadow move. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. The door was closed, and I was alone. I finished my coffee and decided to get back to work, hoping to keep myself busy and distracted. When I returned to the garden section, things had taken a turn for the worse. More items were out of place. Bags of mulch had been ripped open. Garden tools were scattered on the floor, and the rusty watering can was back where I had found it, despite me moving it to the back. My heart was racing, and I felt a cold sweat break out. I grabbed my walkie-talkie and called one of my coworkers, Mark, who was working in the electronics section. He came over, and I told him everything that had happened. He looked around, clearly skeptical, but when he saw the mess, his expression changed. We decided to stick together for the rest of the night, figuring that whatever was going on, we'd feel safer in numbers. As we were cleaning up, we both heard a low, whispering sound. It was faint, almost like a breeze, but unmistakable. We couldn't make out any words, but it was enough to make the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We followed the sound, which seemed to be coming from the back corner of the garden section near the storage area. As we approached, the whispering grew louder, but still unintelligible. We reached the storage area, and the whispering abruptly stopped. Everything was eerily silent. Mark and I exchanged uneasy glances, and then we saw it, a small, dusty notebook lying on the floor. It hadn't been there earlier. I picked it up and flipped through the pages. Most of them were blank, but a few had strange, scribbled drawings and random words that didn't make sense. We decided to take the notebook to our manager in the morning. For the rest of our shift, we stayed close together, constantly looking over our shoulders. The weird occurrences stopped, but the uneasy feeling lingered. When our manager arrived, we showed him the notebook and told him everything that had happened. He listened, but I could tell he didn't really believe us. He took the notebook and said he'd look into it, but I never heard anything about it again. Since that night, I've avoided working in the garden section as much as possible. I still don't know what caused all those strange events, and I'm not sure I want to know. I'm not usually one to post about weird experiences, but this one night at Walmart was too creepy to keep to myself. It was a few months ago, and I still can't get it out of my head. I had just gotten off work, and it was around 11 p.m. I decided to swing by Walmart to pick up a few things. The store was pretty empty, just a few other late-night shoppers and some employees stocking shelves. I like shopping late because it's quiet and I can get in and out quickly. I headed straight to the electronics section to look for a new phone charger. As I was browsing the shelves, I heard a strange noise. It sounded like a soft humming, almost like someone was singing under their breath. I looked around, but there was no one else in the aisle. Figuring it was just my imagination, I shrugged it off and kept looking. A few minutes later, I heard it again, but louder this time. It was this low, melodic humming that seemed to be coming from the back of the aisle. I walked towards the sound, curious but a little freaked out. When I reached the end of the aisle, the humming stopped abruptly. There was no one there, just a bunch of boxes and electronics. Feeling a bit uneasy, I grabbed the charger I needed and decided to quickly finish my shopping. I made my way to the grocery section to pick up some snacks. As I turned into one of the aisles, I noticed a shopping cart parked at an odd angle, blocking most of the aisle. It was filled with random items: a loaf of bread, a few cans of soup, and a pack of batteries. It looked like someone had abandoned it in a hurry. I pushed the cart aside and continued down the aisle. That's when I felt it. This cold, prickly sensation on the back of my neck, like I was being watched. I glanced around, but there was no one nearby. The store was almost eerily silent except for the distant beeping of the checkout scanners. I shook off the feeling and tried to focus on my shopping. I picked up a few more items and headed towards the self-checkout lanes. As I scanned my items, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked up and saw a figure standing at the far end of the store, near the toy section. It was hard to make out any details, but it looked like a tall man, just standing there watching. A chill ran down my spine. I quickly finished checking out and headed for the exit. As I walked past the toy section, I glanced over and saw that the figure was gone. But something else caught my eye. One of the toy displays had been knocked over, and toys were scattered all over the floor. It looked like it had just happened, but there was no one around. I hurried to my car, trying to shake off the creepy feeling. As I was loading my bags into the trunk, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, expecting to see another customer or an employee, but the parking lot was empty. The only sound was the distant hum of the streetlights. I got in my car and locked the doors, my heart pounding. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, but there were no cars behind me. When I got home, I decided to do some research. I found a few stories online about other people experiencing strange things at that Walmart, but nothing quite like what I had experienced. It was like the store had a life of its own after dark. I haven't been back to that Walmart since. I drive a little farther to shop at a different store now. Thank you for watching. If you found these stories gripping, don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling content. For another hair-raising tale, check out our suggested video. And if you're hungry for more eerie encounters, dive into our playlist featuring similar chilling narratives.